The night Vincent Moretti found his assistant asleep behind a dented trash bin, the king of Blackwell Avenue thought he was looking at laziness. He thought he was looking at disrespect. He did not expect to find a threadbare blanket, a child's inhaler, and a folded hospital bill with his own family name written across the top. If this story grabs you by the throat before the first minute is over, stay with me and subscribe, because what Vincent learned in that alley changed the rules of his empire forever. Vincent Moretti was not a man people kept waiting. In the west side of Halston City, his name moved ahead of him like weather. Men straightened their backs when his black sedan rolled past. Shopkeepers lowered their voices. Judges pretended they did not know him, and councilmen pretended they had never taken his calls. He ran the Moretti territory with a cold, efficient hand that made even allies nervous. He was 39, sharp-suited, iron-spined, and famous for two things: never forgiving betrayal, and never letting emotion make a decision for him. That was why the sight in the alley behind Rossi's butcher shop stopped him cold. It was nearly 2 in the morning. A meeting with a dock broker had run long, then longer, then ugly. Vincent had left 2 men to clean up the paperwork, and one to remind the broker that delayed payments were not a habit that survived in Moretti territory. He had taken the quieter route back to his car, cutting through the narrow service alley that smelled of bleach, rainwater, and old cardboard. That was when he saw a shape tucked between a stack of milk crates and the restaurant dumpster. His hand moved under his coat by instinct. Rocco Bellini, his oldest lieutenant, came half a step behind him and followed his gaze. "Want me to wake him?" Vincent narrowed his eyes. "That, not a him. That, Benny." Rocco squinted. "You were kidding." He wasn't. Was curled on his side under a thin army surplus blanket, knees tucked to his chest, suit jacket folded beneath his head as a pillow. Benny was not built for alleys. He was round-faced, broad through the middle, soft around the jaw, and always slightly out of breath because he spent his days running between floors at the Moretti estate with files, phones, coffee trays, and impossible requests. He had a gift for remembering details no one else could remember: times, addresses, license plates, favorite cigars, medication schedules. The exact way Vincent's coffee had to look before dawn meetings. He was 26, harmless on the surface, and absurdly out of place in a gutter shadow at 2 in the morning. "Wake him," Vincent said. Rocco nudged Benny's shoe with the toe of his boot. "Rise and shine, sweetheart." Benny startled so violently he hit his head on the brick wall. He came awake with a gasp, flailing, eyes wide and glassy until they landed on Vincent. Then all the blood seemed to drain from his face. "Boss." He scrambled upright, clutching the blanket as if he could hide behind it. "I can explain." Vincent looked him over with a slow, hard stare. Cheap knit cap, shirt collar wilted, one cuff stained with grease. Not drunk. Not high, just exhausted. "Try," Vincent said. Benny swallowed. "I missed the last bus." Rocco barked a laugh. "So you moved into a dumpster?" "No, I just—" Benny stopped. Beanie stopped, breathing shallowly. "I didn't want to wake anyone at the house." Vincent's expression did not change. "You work out of my estate. You carry keys to 3 offices, 2 safes, and my schedule. And when you miss a bus, you sleep in an alley 2 blocks from a butcher shop?" Benny's fingers tightened on the blanket. It wouldn't happen again. That answer irritated Vincent more than any excuse would have. He stepped forward, and Benny flinched before he could hide it. Vincent noticed the flinch. He noticed everything. He crouched and picked up the worn canvas bag half hidden under the blanket. Benny lunged. "Please don't." Inside was a spare shirt, 2 apples, a bottle of water, a child's blue inhaler, and a fat white envelope bent soft at the corners from being handled too often. Vincent took out the paper at the top. St. Catherine's Medical Center. Past due notice. Patient Emily Carter. The balance was enough to choke a decent man and enrage a practical one. Handwritten across the corner in blue pen were the words, "Do not send final notice to shelter office until Friday." Vincent looked up slowly. Benny's mouth trembled once. Then he set his jaw, as if humiliation hurt less when braced for. "What shelter?" Vincent asked. Benny said nothing. Vincent held up the inhaler. "Whose is this?" Benny stared at the ground. "My sister's." Silence settled over the alley. Rainwater dripped from a rusted fire escape above them. Rocco's face lost its usual amusement. "You got a sister?" Benny nodded. "Where is she?" Vincent asked. "At St. Catherine's tonight." Benny's voice thinned. "Most nights lately." Vincent rose to his full height. "Look at me." Benny obeyed. The kid had dark crescents under his eyes, a bruise yellowing at the edge of one wrist, pride hanging by a thread. "Start from the beginning," Vincent said. Benny pressed his lips together. "Boss, It's not your problem. Vincent took one step closer until Benny had no choice but to meet his gaze. You are standing in my territory, carrying my paperwork by day and sleeping in my alleys by night. It became my problem the second I saw you. For a moment, Benny looked as if he might lie again. Then something in him gave way. My mom died 4 months ago, he said too fast, as if speed might get him through it before shame could stop him. Cancer. We'd already sold the apartment furniture to pay for treatments, and when she passed, the landlord wanted 3 months back rent. I kept Emily in school as long as I could. Then her asthma got worse. She had 2 attacks in 1 week. We lost the apartment. I've been paying for motels when I can, shelter beds when I can. I kept Emily at St. Catherine's with one of the church social workers when she got bad this week. I just needed to make it to Friday after payroll. Rocco stared at him. You've been homeless this whole time? Benny gave a miserable little shrug. Vincent said, why say nothing? Because this job is the first steady job I've ever had that pays enough to matter. Benny's eyes shone, but he fought the tears back with visible force. Because people hear assistant, and they think coffee, paper clips, and getting yelled at. But this job means medication. It means school shoes. It means my sister gets to think there's still a world ahead of her. If anybody thought I was unstable or distracted or pathetic, he swallowed. I figured I'd be gone. The truth hit Vincent harder than he expected. Not because one employee had hidden a hard life. In Vincent's world, everyone hid something. It crushed him because he remembered every time in the last month he had snapped his fingers and sent Benny back down 3 flights for a file. Every eye roll over a late coffee. Every clipped order barked at a kid who had been doing his job by day while trying not to lose his sister by night. And because the hospital notice bore the Moretti family name in the corner. Vincent turned the paper over. There it was, stamped small at the bottom. Moretti Family Charitable Foundation Pediatric Relief Transfer Pending Review. A donation fund his father had created years ago for public relations and quiet tax strategy. Some bureaucrat had delayed review while Benny's sister struggled to breathe. Vincent folded the paper once, clean and precise. Rocco, he said. Yeah, boss? To get the car. Benny blinked. I'm fine. Really, I can go back to the house by morning and... You were not sleeping in an alley again. Vincent handed him the bag. And your sister is not waiting on a review. Benny stared as if the words had been spoken in another language. Rocco headed toward the street at a run. Vincent stayed where he was. You should have told me. Benny laughed once, small and broken. You're Vincent Moretti. That is my name. It's also the reason nobody tells you when they were drowning. They just try not to do it on your shoes. For the first time in years, Vincent had no answer. He took Benny and the blanket and the hospital bill and went straight to St. Catherine's. The night staff tried to stop them at the pediatric wing until Rocco said the Moretti name in the quiet tone that made resistance seem theoretical. Vincent disliked using fear in hospitals, but he disliked delay more. Emily Carter was 11 years old and all elbows, pale freckles, and stubborn eyes. She was asleep when they entered, a plastic tube beneath her nose, a paperback fantasy novel open face down on her blanket. Benny went to her bedside so quickly his whole body seemed to lean toward her before his feet did. He touched her hair with extraordinary gentleness. Hey, Em, he whispered. Her eyes fluttered open. You came back. Always. She noticed Vincent and Rocco and immediately stiffened. Who are they? Benny wiped at his face and failed to hide that he had been crying. My boss. And Rocco. Emily looked Vincent up and down with the distrust only sick children and old grandmothers could deliver without apology. Your boss looks expensive. Rocco choked on a laugh. Vincent almost smiled. Almost. The doctor on duty, a tired woman named Dr. Marin Shaw, stepped into the hall to speak with Vincent. Benny started to follow, but Vincent held up a hand. Stay with your sister. Dr. Shaw crossed her arms. If this is about payment, billing opens at 8. It's about treatment, Vincent said. Her expression sharpened. And you are. Someone who does intend for that girl's care to hinge on office hours. He handed her the notice. Tell me what she needs. Done, Vincent said. By sunrise, 2 things had happened. First, Emily's balance had been cleared and her care transferred to a private specialist the Morettis sometimes used for families they owed favors to. Second, Benny and Emily had been moved into the east guest wing of the Moretti estate, a place of quiet halls, white linens, and windows big enough to make people from hard lives suspicious. Benny stood in the doorway of the suite holding his bag like he expected someone to take the room back the second he touched anything. There has to be a catch, he said. Vincent set the hospital paperwork on the entry table. There is. You sleep indoors. You eat real meals. Your sister recovers. And you stop lying to my face. Benny gave a weak smile. That last one feels personal. It is. Emily, propped against pillows in the bedroom, called out. Do we get robbed if we stay here? Rocco leaned around the doorway. Only emotionally, kid. The decor is vicious. That got a laugh out of her. A real one. Vincent watched Benny look at his sister and felt something deeply inconvenient shift inside him. He told himself it was responsibility, nothing more. For 3 days, that lie held. On the 4th day, everything changed. The Moretti estate ran on habits and hierarchy. Men came and went through the front security gate. Cooks worked from dawn. Drivers rotated cars. Rocco handled enforcement. Dominic Vale handled books and legal fronts. Lena Moretti, Vincent's widowed aunt, handled the household with military grace and an old-school Sicilian sense that feeding people solved half of human weakness. He continued working, though Vincent reduced his load. Benny protested. Vincent ignored him. The kids still fetched schedules and answered calls, but now he did it after breakfast, with a proper room, decent clothes, and his sister tucked into sunlit corners with books, juice, and breathing treatments. Rocco, less subtle, began smuggling desserts to Emily and treating Benny with a rough affection he hid under insults. Eat, he would grumble, shoving a plate toward him. You look like a man who apologizes to chairs after bumping into them. I do not. You absolutely do. I only apologize when it's a nice chair. That was the thing about Benny. He did not dominate a room. He eased it. He had a way of making hard men set down their shoulders for 1 minute longer than usual. He remembered the gardener's granddaughter's recital. He found Aunt Lena's missing brooch in a sofa seam. He organized Vincent's impossible paper mountain into a system so clean even Dominic admitted it was useful. By the 2nd week, Emily was breathing easier. She also had opinions. Things might have gone on in that strange, fragile piece much longer, if not for Carlo Viscari. Carlo ran the East Harbor crew, a crew that had spent the last year losing ground to Moretti pressure at the docks. He was flashy where Vincent was restrained, cruel where Vincent was calculating, and vain enough to consider humiliation a greater injury than financial loss. Vincent had tightened shipping routes, bought 3 union men out from under him, and quietly turned one of Carlo's own accountants. Carlo had not forgotten any of it. He also had eyes. A week after Benny and Emily moved into the estate, one of Carlo's spotters saw Vincent leave St. Catherine's with Benny and a little girl in tow. 2 days later, another saw Benny at the market with Moretti security hanging discreetly back. Then a driver overheard Rocco threatening a pharmacist who tried to delay Emily's refill. Patterns formed. In that world, patterns were leverage. Vincent learned Carlo had noticed during a dinner meeting at Bella Rosa, a restaurant so dim and expensive it looked built for confessions and threats. Carlo swirled his wine and smiled too often. Heard you've opened a charity hostel now, Vince. Vincent sliced through veal without looking up. You heard wrong. Did I? Carlo dabbed his mouth. Little plump assistant of yours. Cute kid's sister. Very touching. Makes a man seem almost human. The table went still. Rocco's hand flattened beside his plate. Dominic looked down, expression blank in the way he wore when mentally calculating how many bodies a sentence might produce. Vincent met Carlo's eyes across the candles. Be careful. Carlo leaned back, smiling like a man entertaining himself with a lit match near gasoline. Relax. I'm complimenting you. Everyone said Vincent Moretti had no weak spots. Turns out he just hid them under his own roof. Vincent rose so smoothly, it took the room a second to understand he was standing. Then he leaned over the table just enough for Carlo's grin to thin. If you ever put that girl's name in your mouth again, Vincent said quietly, they will be identifying what's left of you by jewelry. Carlo lifted both hands in mock surrender. Touchy. Vincent left before dessert. In the car, Rocco said. We should move the kid and Benny to one of the lake houses. Back at the estate, he doubled security anyway. 2 extra men at the gate. 1 car shadowing Benny's errands. Emily indoors after dark. No unscheduled staff changes. He told himself that was sufficient. It was not. 3 days later, Benny insisted on going into the city himself to deliver revised ledgers to Dominic's legal office and pick up Emily's custom nebulizer mask from the medical supply store. Vincent wanted to send someone else. Benny pushed back. I can live here like a ceramic vase, he said. You're not a vase. Then stop wrapping me in bubble wrap, Rocco muttered. Look. Pay cash to hear Aunt Lena explain bubble wrap to the old guard. Vincent ignored him. Take Marco and Ellis. Benny nodded. Fine. The morning should have been routine. It was sunny. Traffic heavy. Harmless. Benny dropped the ledgers at Dominic's office on Vestry Street, then walked 2 blocks to the medical supply store with Marco and Ellis trailing in staggered formation. He came out with the box in one hand and a paper sack of lemon cookies Emily liked in the other. What happened next took less than 12 seconds. A delivery van rolled through a red light and clipped the parked sedan meant for Benny's security tail, crunching steel and blasting a horn that snapped every head on the sidewalk toward the street. At the exact same moment, a woman stumbled out of a nearby doorway screaming for help, blood on her sleeve. Marco broke left toward the noise. Ellis pivoted right. 2 men in electrician uniforms came up behind Benny. One jammed a needle toward his neck. Benny twisted at the last second because a reflection in the pharmacy window caught his eye. The needle scraped his skin instead of sinking deep. He shouted and drove the box into the attacker's face. The other man grabbed his coat and slammed him into the van door. Benny bit the man's wrist hard enough to draw blood. That bought him half a second. He ran. Not away from the danger. Toward the street. Toward people. Toward witnesses. He heard Ellis shout. A gun appeared somewhere behind him. Then Marco drove shoulder first into one attacker and sent both of them crashing into a newspaper stand. Pedestrians screamed. Benny ran straight into a fruit display, skidded, recovered, and nearly made it to the corner before the second man seized the back of his shirt. Benny twisted and hit him with the cookie bag. Lemons burst and sugar flew like confetti. It would have been funny if it were not so desperate. Then a black SUV mounted the curb. Doors opened. Not Moretti men. The scary men. The street exploded into chaos. Ellis drew and fired once. Glass shattered. A woman ducked behind a mailbox. Someone shouted about a gun. Someone else started filming. Benny got one look at the faces pouring out of the SUV and understood with absolute clarity that if they got him inside that vehicle, he and Emily were both finished. He made a choice. He turned and sprinted not toward safety, but toward St. Catherine's Medical Center 6 blocks away, toward the one place he knew Emily was due for afternoon tests. He had changed the appointment that morning. No one but the estate should have known. That thought struck him like ice. Someone had told them. He ran harder. By the time Vincent's phone rang, Benny had already disappeared into traffic. Rocco answered the first call from Ellis and listened with a face that went from irritation to murder in 3 seconds flat. Vincent was in the estate office, reviewing warehouse manifests. He knew before Rocco spoke that the news would be bad. Attempted grab on Vestry, Rocco said. Marco's down, breathing. Ellis is in pursuit. Vascari crew involved. The room seemed to lose air. Vincent stood so fast his chair hit the wall. Where? Oh. Heading north on foot. Vincent was already moving. Get me eyes on every intersection between Vestry and St. Catherine's. Shut the harbor exits. Call Nico at traffic cams. I want feeds now. Rocco was beside him, phone in hand, voice snapping orders before they reached the front steps. Dominic came out of the side office. What happened? Or Carlo got ambitious, Vincent said, and there was something in his tone that made Dominic step aside without another word. They were in the car in seconds. The city blurred past. Vincent called the hospital himself. Lock the pediatric floor. No visitors without direct visual confirmation from me or Dr. Shaw. If a man named Carlo Vascari or anyone unlisted appears, security stalls them, and you pull every child into inner rooms. Do you understand? The administrator stammered. Vincent hung up before she finished agreeing. Nico from traffic called back with live camera access routed to the screen built into the car console. Vincent's jaw locked. Carlo knows hospitals. He'll send men ahead. He was right. At St. Catherine's, Emily had just finished a breathing treatment and was arguing with a nurse about the flavor of gelatin when the power on the pediatric floor flickered once. She stepped into the hall and saw 2 maintenance men she did not recognize heading toward the secured ward doors. She knew trouble when it wore a uniform. Without a word, she turned back, grabbed Emily's hand, and pulled her off the bed. She rushed Emily and 3 other children into a supply room hidden behind the respiratory unit and keyed the lock just as one of the fake maintenance men reached the nurse's station. Back on the street, Benny stumbled against the brick wall of St. Bartholomew's Church and nearly fell. The scratch at his neck had gone numb, and his fingers tingled. Not enough sedative to drop him, enough to slow him. He yanked his phone from his pocket with shaking hands and called Vincent. Vincent answered on the first ring. Where are you? Benny could barely get breath. Churchyard. Near Mercer. Boss, Emily's appointment. They knew. Somebody knew. Vincent's voice turned deadly calm. Listen to me. Stay on the line. Rocco has your route. We're 2 minutes out. I can keep going. No heroics. Benny almost laughed at that. Little late. A sound cracked from the street beyond the church wall. Shouts. Running feet. Vincent heard it too. Minnie? Mm, they found me. They found me. The line went ragged with breath and movement. Vincent slammed a fist against the seat divider. Rive! Inside the churchyard, Benny ran past a stone angel with a chipped nose and through a side gate toward Mercer Avenue. One of Carlo's men vaulted the low wall behind him. Another came around from the opposite side, boxing him in. Benny did the only thing he could. He grabbed a rusted metal trash can lid and swung it like a shield. The first man cursed as the edge clipped his knuckles. The second lunged. Benny rammed him in the stomach with all the force his heavier frame could gather. It was ugly, graceless, effective. The man folded just long enough for Benny to break through and reach the street. A black sedan screeched across the intersection. Vincent's car. Rocco was out before it fully stopped, gun drawn. Two Moretti men in the trailing vehicle fanned wide. The churchyard erupted in gunfire. Vincent saw Benny in the middle of it, shirt torn, face white, still trying to get toward the hospital instead of away from it. The sight hit him like a blade. He crossed the pavement and caught Benny by the shoulders just as Benny's knees started to buckle. Emily? Benny rasped. At the hospital. I know. No, you don't. They knew that. They knew the appointment, somebody told them. Vincent looked into his eyes and saw terror, not for himself, but for his sister. That was the moment something cold and final locked into place inside Vincent Moretti. This was no longer about defense. This was war. He turned to Rocco. Get him to the second car. Lock it. Two men with him. Benny grabbed Vincent's sleeve with surprising strength. Don't leave me out of this. Vincent bent close. I am leaving you alive. That's the only part of this you control. Then he peeled Benny's fingers off his cuff and sent the car racing toward the hospital with Rocco beside it. Vincent took the lead vehicle himself. St. Catherine's was already under pressure by the time they arrived. The front entrance had been flooded by a false disturbance in the emergency ward. Two Vascari men in paramedic jackets were in custody thanks to an alert security guard Vincent had once helped get his brother out of gambling debt. Another man had cut basement camera lines before vanishing. Dr. Shaw met Vincent in the stairwell, hair loose, face taut. They tried the ward doors. I moved the children. Emily? Safe for now? For now is not enough? He sent teams through the stairwells, roof access, basement, and loading dock. Every entrance, every exit. He ordered the real police anonymously tipped to a narcotics rumor 3 blocks south, pulling official attention away from St. Catherine's while his people contained the fight. It was not noble. It was effective. In the 5th floor service corridor, Ellis cornered one of Carlo's spotters and forced out the detail Vincent needed least and expected most. The appointment information had not come from a hospital clerk. It had come from inside the Moretti estate. Dominic Vale had authorized a courier change on Benny's schedule that morning, routed through the internal office list, and one of his junior bookkeepers was cousin to a Vascari soldier. The boy had sold the information for cash and a promise of promotion. When Rocco heard the name over the phone, he went silent for 2 full seconds. Then he said, "I'll deal with him." Vincent's reply was ice. No. First we finish Carlo. They found Emily in the respiratory supply room, trying very hard not to be scared for the sake of the younger children hiding with her. When Vincent opened the door, she stood so fast the chair behind her toppled. Where's Benny? He's alive. That was all she needed. She ran straight at him. Vincent caught her awkwardly, like a man unfamiliar with fragile things but determined not to drop one now. Take me to him, she said into his coat. Soon? No. Now. He looked at Dr. Shaw. Dr. Shaw. Shaw looked back with the flat expression of a doctor who had seen too much panic to indulge avoidable delay. She'll calm faster if she sees him. So Vincent took Emily downstairs himself, with 4 armed men around them, and sirens wailing somewhere beyond the ambulance bay. Benny was in a secured consultation room with a nurse cleaning the scratch at his neck. He looked up when the door opened. Emily launched herself into him so hard the nurse yelped. Benny folded around her, holding on as if his heart had briefly left his body and then been handed back. Sorry, he whispered into her hair. You are not allowed to die before I get taller than you, Emily said fiercely. That may take a while. Very strategic about my height. She laughed through tears. The sound cracked whatever remained of Vincent's distance. Rocco appeared at the doorway. Boss. Vincent stepped outside. What? We found Carlo's fallback site. Rocco's face was hard. Old cold storage warehouse on River Street. Half his crew's moving there. Maybe all of them. Vincent glanced back through the glass panel at Benny and Emily, then at the men waiting for orders. Good, he said. The raid on River Street started at 11:40 that night. Vincent did not call it a raid. He called it correction. The warehouse had once stored frozen fish and imported produce. Now it held contraband electronics, unregistered weapons, and Carlo Vascari's belief that he still mattered. Moretti scouts mapped entrances. Snipers covered the riverside. Power to the block went out 40 seconds before entry. Rocco led Team 2 through the loading bay. Vincent went through the office mezzanine with Team 1. Inside, men shouted. Beams of flashlight swept crates, and gunfire erupted in vicious close bursts that hammered through corrugated steel. Vincent moved like a man with purpose so clear it had become a physical force. One guard fell before he finished turning. Another dropped his weapon when he recognized the face coming through the dark. Carlo ran. Of course he ran. He bolted from the counting office toward the rear freezer corridor, dragging one of his own lieutenants as cover until the lieutenant realized too late what role he had been assigned. Rocco took the man down with a shoulder shot and kept moving. Vincent followed Carlo into the old blast chiller room, where broken hooks hung from ceiling tracks like iron question marks. Carlo turned at last, gun shaking in his hand. All this for an assistant? Vincent kept walking. No, he said. All this because you mistook kindness for weakness. Carlo laughed, breathless and ugly. That little stray made you sentimental. I should thank him. Vincent shot the gun out of Carlo's hand. Carlo screamed. Vincent closed the distance and drove him against a freezer door hard enough to rattle the frame. You came for a sick child to get to me. Carlo bared bloody teeth. And it worked. Vincent's eyes did not change. No, this is what failing looks like. When it was over, Carlo Vascari left River Street alive only because Vincent wanted every rival in Halston to see what remained of his empire by daylight. But the longest night was not yet done, because when Vincent returned to the estate with dried river grime on his cuffs and blood on one knuckle, Dominic Vale was waiting in the study. Dominic had been with the Morettis for 11 years. He was precise, educated, soft-spoken, and so calm under pressure people often mistook him for trustworthy by nature rather than by practice. Vincent had trusted him with books, fronts, licenses, political payments, and once, years ago, with the location of a safe house. Now Dominic stood with both hands visible and said, "The courier leak was not intentional." Vincent closed the door behind him. No. The bookkeeper sold the schedule without my knowledge. But with your access. Dominic's jaw tightened. Yes. Rocco stood by the fireplace like a judgment carved in stone. Then he sat in an armchair across the room, pale but upright, Emily asleep under a blanket on the sofa behind him. Aunt Lena sat beside the child knitting, because she had discovered long ago that the best way to terrify dishonest men was to look domestic while hearing everything. Vincent looked at Benny. Why are you here? Benny swallowed. Because I asked to be. Rocco grunted disapproval. Benny went on. At St. Catherine's, before the attack, Dominic called me twice asking if I had rerouted the appointment pickup because you hated last-minute schedule changes. I thought he was just being Dominic. Then, when I ran, I realized Carlo's men were too exact, too fast. Somebody with house access had to know. Dominic said sharply, "If you are accusing me of setting you up, be very careful." Benny flinched, but he did not retreat. Won't him accusing you of caring more about clean ledgers than messy people. You forwarded everything. Medical invoices, apartment forms, expense notes. You had to see the shelter address and the hospital mail. I saw unusual paperwork, Dominic admitted. He did not review the personal details. That is not my function. Benny gave a hollow laugh. Right, because if it's not in a column, it's invisible. Vincent looked at Dominic for a long moment. Then he understood the deeper wound. Benny had hidden his life because he feared being discarded. And inside Vincent's own organization, a man he trusted had created exactly the kind of blind machine that made discarding people easy. The attack had required Carlo's cruelty, but it had been enabled by Moretti carelessness. That failure belonged to Vincent. He turned to Dominic. Leave every key, code, and ledger token on the desk. Dominic stared. You were removing me? Over this. Over the fact that a child was nearly taken because you treat human beings like paperwork that wrinkled itself. This is emotional. Yes, Vincent said. Try to survive my having some. Dominic looked to Rocco as if expecting support from the old guard. Rocco only smiled without warmth. One by one, Dominic emptied his pockets. When he was done, Vincent said, You will be escorted to the gate. If I learn you shared one more internal detail with anyone, exile will become a memory you miss. Dominic left without another word. The room was quiet after the door shut. Aunt Lena kept knitting. Emily slept. Benny stared at the floor. Vincent moved closer. Look at me. Benny did. You saved your sister today, Vincent said. You saw the trap. You ran toward help. You kept thinking while men with guns chased you. Benny let out a trembling breath. I also delivered myself into your life like a disaster in sensible shoes. Then Benny's composure broke. Boss, this is too much. Emily almost got hurt because of me. Men got shot because of me. Marco? Vincent stepped so close, Benny had no room to shrink away. Listen carefully. Carlo chose to come for you. Dominic's negligence opened a door. None of that becomes your guilt because you were poor, or tired, or trying to keep your sister alive. Benny's eyes filled. Not built for your world, Vincent answered before he could stop himself. Then maybe my world should have been built better. He had the East Wing redone, not like a guest suite, but like a real apartment, with warm lamps, a proper desk, and shelves Emily could reach without climbing. He created a private fund, in Emily's name, for school and medical care. When Benny protested, Vincent cut him off. It is a charity. It feels like charity. Ooh, it's investment. In what? Vincent held his gaze. The future of two people I intend to keep safe. Benny went very still. Rocco, passing through with a folder, reversed direction so fast he nearly walked into a vase. At Sunday supper, with half the household present, she set down her fork and announced, Vincent likes Benny. No one breathed. Benny turned a color usually associated with emergency flares. Emily. Vincent, to the astonishment of everyone including himself, said, yes. Silence again. Benny looked up so fast he nearly knocked over his glass. What? Vincent set down his knife with deliberate care. I said yes. Emily leaned back, satisfied. Great. That was taking forever. Benny stared at Vincent, wholly unprepared for the fact that the most feared man in Halston City had just agreed with an 11-year-old over roast chicken. Vincent's voice softened, though not by much. I am not practiced at this, Rocco muttered. That may be the understatement of the century. Vincent ignored him. But I know this. When I saw you in that alley, I thought I was looking at a problem. I was wrong. I was looking at a man carrying more than he should have had to carry alone. Benny's eyes shone. Vincent went on. Then Carlo came for you, and the idea of losing you felt less like inconvenience and more like losing the part of my life that had unexpectedly begun to matter. Benny whispered, You make that sound terrifying. It is terrifying, Vincent said. For me especially. I cannot promise you a simple life, he said, but I can promise you honesty, protection, and a door that stays open for you and your sister as long as you want it. If that is not enough, I will accept it. If it is, then I would like the chance to be something more than your employer. Benny smiled through tears. And yes, but if you break my heart, Emily says she knows where the kitchen knives are. Emily lifted a hand. I do? From there, life did not become easy, but it became shared. Vincent moved Benny officially out of the assistant pool and into a role that fit his real gifts: household operations, charitable oversight, and internal welfare review. If we missed you, Vincent said, we are missing others. Benny took that responsibility personally. Within a month, he had reorganized staff, emergency funds, medical leave procedures, and housing support for lower-level workers with families. He created anonymous request forms so proud men could ask for help without standing in front of a desk feeling small. He turned the old charity shell Vincent's father had used for public image into something real. And Vincent, to his own enduring shock, discovered he liked coming home to lights under Benny's door. 6 months after the alley, the first cold snap of winter came down over Halston City. At the Moretti Foundation's renovated outreach building on Blackwell Avenue, families lined up for clinic vouchers, winter coats, and legal aid referrals. The old sign had been replaced. The new one read Moretti Community House in modest bronze letters. Vincent had wanted something less obvious. Benny had insisted people in trouble needed to know exactly which door could open. The outreach center hummed with noise and warmth and the strange miracle of people receiving help before desperation turned into damage. Benny watched it all with shining eyes. Vincent leaned close. You built this. Benny shook his head. We built this. Vincent glanced toward the front windows, where snow had begun to fall in soft white streaks over Blackwell Avenue, the same neighborhood where a man had once slept with a blanket behind a butcher shop because he had run out of places to pretend he was fine. No, Vincent said quietly. You changed what was possible here. I just stopped getting in the way. Benny laughed, then reached for Vincent's hand beneath the table where no one but family would bother pretending not to see. Emily noticed anyway, of course. She grinned. Oh, gross. Uncivilized child, Aunt Lena murmured, though she was smiling too. Vincent watched Benny rise, watched the room orient itself around him without force, and thought of the alley again. Of the blanket, of the hospital bill, of the terrible weight hidden behind a polite smile. He had once believed power meant never needing anyone. Then he had found a tired man sleeping on cold pavement and discovered that real power might be the courage to let one human life break your habits open until mercy could enter. Benny smiled up at him, cheeks pink from cold, eyes clear now in a way Vincent would protect with everything he had. "Thank you," he said. Vincent brushed snow from Benny's sleeve. "For what?" "For not leaving me in that alley." Vincent's expression gentled into something only Benny and Emily and the people who truly knew him ever got to see. "I was the one rescued, Benny." From the doorway, Emily groaned loudly. "If you two are going to be emotional in winter, at least do it inside. My lungs would like a vote." Rocco opened the door behind her. "Kid's right. Also, Aunt Lena made cannoli, and if you stand out here too long, I'm declaring them abandoned." Benny laughed. Vincent took his hand openly this time. Together they went inside, out of the cold, into the light, where family waited, and no one who belonged to that house would ever again have to sleep alone in the dark.